I would say the probability, the likelihood of that happening when I was an 11-year-old kid was 0.00001%. And she went, "Well, Paul, it's not about you, is it?" And I thought, wow, she's just hit the nail on the head.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Players Lounge on the Football Business TV, where the game gets down to business. Today in the Players Lounge, I'm happy to welcome somebody, an ex-player, but I don't want to label him as an ex-player. For me, he represents what I like about transition, what I like about my passion, my values, and honestly, we've played for the same clubs, so there's a connection. There's a connection, whether it's on the pitch or off the pitch. Without further ado, welcome to the Players Lounge to Mr. Paul McVeigh. Paul, how are we doing?
Oh, what an introduction. I am embarrassingly well. Thank you, my friend. Thank you. That was very kind. Very, very kind. And I actually forgot that because, some people actually think we're twins, we're brothers, you know. 'Cause you're black, I'm white,
Yeah,
you're 6'4", I'm 4 foot nothing. But because we both played for Spurs and Norwich, everybody gets me confused with you. You're like, you're the defender, I'm the attacker. They're like, "Are you Sebas?" I'm like, "No, I'm Paul McVeigh."
yeah.
But yeah,
I often been
just
called Paul. I'm like Paul. No,
yeah.
I'm Seb.
No, we just need to just clarify. I'm over here, you're over there doing what you're doing. So no, it's great to see you again, my friend.
Yeah, you are. You said embarrassingly well. What does that mean?
It means life could not be going any better right now.
Tell us. Tell us why.
Tell you why. Well, I think for me the dream that I had as a kid, like probably you did, I'm sure like millions, if not billions of kids had this dream growing up and thinking I would just love to be a professional footballer. I'd love to be a Premier League player, I'd love to be an international player. And that was whenever I was 11. Just say I was 11-year-old growing up in Belfast. And to have that as your dream. Now, I grew up in what was called the Troubles in Belfast in Northern Ireland. So there was a civil war happening between the Irish people and the British Army. So that was the context of growing up. But I still just wanted to be a professional footballer, Premier League player, international footballer. And I would say the probability, the likelihood of that happening when I was an 11-year-old kid was 0.00001%. But actually, the potential that I had was probably quite high, like yourself, because you were a decent player and you always seemed to get picked and you were one of the better players until eventually I started at Tottenham Hotspur as a 16-year-old and then managed to have nearly 20 years of playing professional football and in England. And because I just feel like I'm the luckiest guy in the world to have done that for so long. And then when I stopped playing 15 years ago, my last club was Norwich City, just a couple of years before you joined. And my manager was Paul Lambert. And as we were winning the league, then get into the championship and then back to back promotions into the Premier League. But before I realised my playing days were over it in 2010 after 16 years. And then I came across this world of keynote speaking. And I thought, wow, no one's ever come out of the Premier League and become a keynote speaker. Lots of after dinner speakers, people tell funny stories and, do that kind of stuff. But I wanted to be a keynote speaker to the business world. And I thought, well, because no one's ever done it, it's highly unlikely that I could do this. So the probability of me being paid, 10, $20,000 an hour, pounds an hour to speak for companies around the world and get flown around the world to do this, the probability, considering I'd never been paid to speak in public at all, was 0.00001%. 1%. But the potential was actually pretty high because it had a background in football. And 15 years later, I've just come back from America. I was just speaking over in New York and North Carolina, spoken for Google 2 weeks ago, speaking for Microsoft in 2 weeks' time for the fourth time. And when you ask me how am I say I feel like I'm the luckiest guy in the world because we're currently I've just secured some investment, and so we're building a global tech platform because we want to build the world's first platform to be able to bring corporates like your Microsofts and Googles with speakers like me or you or any other speaker who does speaks on any subject around the world, almost like want to be the first Airbnb for speakers. And so we're currently doing that. But the gain, said for the third time in my life, the probability of having an idea, of getting investment, of building a global tech platform, the probability of it being successful is 0.0001%. But the potential, because there's never anything like this has ever existed in the world, the potential is enormous. And so that is why I am embarrassingly well.
All right. So, player, psychology, master degree in psychology,
Mhm.
author, leadership coach. Yeah, the life is pretty good. So, no,
Busy. It's also busy.
very busy, but life's pretty cool. And somebody told me, I don't know if it's true, that there's something that came out is about to be launched about a book.
Oh yeah,
Book.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And that book for me today, I want to talk. We're gonna set the stage. We're gonna talk about obviously your childhood, as you mentioned already. But that's not. I just don't want to really want to talk about only football. For me, it's about the mindset. Me and
yeah,
you are very
yeah,
much passionate about behavior, mindset, the psychology,
yeah,
and I wanna have your thought about the origin of the book. I want the book to be the anchor of our discussion.
yeah,
From the book can take us to different places. But before we get to the book itself, when you look back at your playing days, how, what was your inspiration? Whether it's in terms of psychology, behaviors, leadership, what was your inspiration as a player? What was it, a captain? I don't know. Which player? What inspired you? You reckon?
Mm. I think there's lots of things that inspired me before I started playing full time or professionally, and then when I was playing, it probably the the reason why I got inspired was probably changed slightly. So I'd say definitely growing up, and interestingly, I was doing another interview for the book earlier, and I was talking about the time when I met Gianfranco Zola in London, and I was a 21-year-old kid at Norwich City. I'd already made my debut for Tottenham Hotspur in the Premier League as a 19-year-old. I moved on to Norwich City, but as a 21-year-old, I had this attitude and this overwhelming desire of curiosity. And I just always wanted to try and learn. So at the time, Gianfranco Zola was probably the best striker, him and Cantona and a couple of other players in the Premier League. So I thought, how can I go and learn from one of the best players in the world? So I went down and met Gianfranco Zola and took him for lunch, paid for his lunch. But a bit like what you've done today, I came with a long list of questions that I wanted to ask him because I'd read a book when I was 17 by a guy called Tony Robbins. And essentially, in that book, one of the many key messages was that success leaves clues. And because there were so many successful professional footballers, I thought, well, if I can just go and learn from these guys so I can try and imply some of that to me. So one of the guys, not only did Gianfranco Zola inspire me because he was my height, very small guy, but one of the best players in the league. So I thought clearly it's not a height thing, doesn't hold you back. But I've doing my research, I realized that his time crossed at Napoli whenever Maradona was at Napoli. So I was saying to him, so of course, growing up, the 1986 World Cup for me was just the start of my, oh my goodness, the best players in the world all coming together, and Maradona probably single handedly won the World Cup. So I was asking Gianfranco in lunch, so tell me about Maradona. Was he always practicing his free kicks because he was one of the best free kicks taker? He was an amazing finisher. Was he always practice his finishing? Just one of the best players in the world. And Gianfranco Zola, the way he looks with his really high cheekbones, really strong cheekbones, and he just started smiling and he went, "No, Paul, he didn't really come to training. He just he just turned up on a Saturday.
He barely trains, barely.
Yeah, didn't train Monday to Friday. You didn't see him. Came on Saturday, scored a hat trick, took the match ball, and went out partying again all week." And I thought, well, isn't that funny? Success leaves clues. Now, if you're absolutely immortal, one of the best ever, a Maradona, you can do that. You can go out partying all week and still be the best player and still single handedly win a World Cup. But like all the rest of us, mere mortals, like you and I, Seb, if you want to try and be the best, you do what Gianfranco Zola does. You work hard every day. You practice your free kicks. He was doing Tai Chi when he was 34 to help him with his fitness and his mindset. And all of the things that I learned from that session was that's the part of the inspiration of just trying to learn from the best so that I could make the most of what opportunity I had. And then, of course, once you start playing and then you start winning championships, and then you get that feeling of, oh my goodness, that is the best feeling in the world as a player, winning league titles, winning games, winning trophies, in big stadia, playing in front of 50, 60, 70,000 people. That was the inspiration for me. And because I just absolutely loved, I was so passionate about training and about playing, because it didn't really matter to me whether it was training or playing. I wanted to win as much equally. So whether it was a training game, five-a-side, whether it was a shooting practice, I was betting and I was going against people. Right, if I beat you, you're getting my lunch. Or if I beat you, you owe me this money, or whatever. Anything for that feeling. And that is just one of the best in the world, because when I was a kid, you know, all I wanted to do was play football. And then whenever I got to Tottenham Hotspur, my first boss was Sir Alan Sugar. So, a bit like the guy who's on The Apprentice now, he's obviously says to me, "Can we pay you some money to kick a ball around with your friends?" And I'm going, "Seb, this is the best job in the world."
And this is where I wanna pause. You said when you came through at Tottenham and then later on Norwich, you must have, I would say, came across different type of leadership, because now you coaching leadership. You are very involved in advocating for leadership in
Mhm.
business of, yeah. Which one of the leadership style you came across that really caught your attention, and which one worked, which one didn't work for you?
Yeah. Well, interestingly, I would say that a lot of them all worked. For example, when I first came to Spurs, my boss was another Argentinian World Cup winner, called Ozzy Ardiles. So again, one of the best players in the world ever. But his style of leadership was very much kind of reserved, very backseat. His again, probably without realizing it, one of the first challenges he had as a leader was his communication, because he didn't fully have a grasp of the English language to be able to say exactly what he meant. But then because he had, let's say, a more reserved personality type, the assistant manager at the time when I first joined was Spurs, one of Spurs' greatest ever players, and still now to this day their highest ever appearance maker was Steve Perryman. I think he played like 700 games for Spurs, and he was the stereotypical alpha male, shout, scream, let everybody know he's in charge, and everybody had to fall in line. So straight away with those two people on my first day, I understood, what does this type of leadership look like when you can't communicate, and almost like what we call in the book the great man theory. It's just you are the person who dictates everything. But interestingly, the reserve coach when I first joined in 1994 was a guy who you and I know both very, very well, was Chris Hughton. And Chris then became almost like a surrogate dad to me. So because of he'd had an amazing playing career, and then because he was one of the coaches at Spurs for a long time, because I came from Belfast and because he played for the Republic of Ireland, he just took me in and just kind of took me under his wing, and he pushed me really, really hard. And he didn't go easy on me in any way. And he would have been the first person I ever had um, what's the word, the relationship where as a coach he'd be like, "Paul, get some balls, come on, we're going to go out and do some finishing." I didn't ask him, he was just telling me this, and I go, "Okay." So that understanding of, he was empathetic, he was caring, he wanted me to do well, he talked to me like I was on his level, not Steve Perryman shouting down at me, not Ozzy Ardiles not able to communicate with me. So when you talk about that range of leaderships, I probably saw it all on the first day. And that was just such an amazing experience. Of course, then you take all of those experiences into how you think it's best for how we lead today. But I would say, interestingly, football has evolved that pretty much every single head coach and manager has the Chris Hughton style now, rather than the Ozzy Ardiles or the and Ozzy Ardiles could be, you could put Fabio Capello in the same category, where he didn't speak the language, isn't able to communicate, versus maybe Graham Potter, who just got the Sweden job and knows how to speak fluent Swedish to be able to go and deliver that communication style, or the Steve Perryman like George Graham before, very very successful. Alex Ferguson, very very successful, but probably what the best did, and Alex Ferguson might be the best example. He had that no one ever questioned his authority, but every single player treated like the way Chris Hughton treated me, where everybody loved him and wanted to run through brick walls for him.
You talk about Chris. Everybody knows that Chris is my English dad. When I
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
came to UK, honestly, without Chris, honestly, I wouldn't be the man that I am today and the player that I've been. So that's why
Absolutely.
that's why I smiled when you mentioned Chris and his management and his leadership, because that's, for me, that sums it all up about his personality, and that you could see that on the football pitch. And I'm really happy. I didn't know that he was so important for you. So
Yeah, yeah.
now I do understand why people mix me and you up. They mix us up because we,
Chris Hughton's really our dad, isn't
yeah,
he?
Chris is really our dad, like for real, for real. But how do you think leadership influence performance in business in football nowadays? Because I always say to people when I'm talking, speaking, that I think sometimes we're using words and ideology. We talk about leadership in football, leadership. But for you being an expert, me wanting to become an expert, how do you really think that it does really influence football? Because for me, leadership is influence rather than a way to be. That's why
Yeah.
you just mentioned three different style of leadership is influence. But what's your take on it?
Well, interesting. That's very kind what you've just said, but I would say, Seb, you are already at the absolute pinnacle of that leadership spectrum, because what I did in my playing career, and again, it's not me being modest or humble, was a fraction 1% of what you did. So if I'm saying I've tried my best for nearly 20 years to get to the pinnacle of the game, the English football game or the international game, you know, I only played like 25 games over a career of over 300 games. I only played 25 games in the Premier League and only scored 2 goals, where you played pretty much your entire career there. So if we're going to talk about levels, then that is where you'd say, well, am I an expert? Well, I'm the only guy that's ever played in the Premier League and has a master's in psychology. I'm the first keynote speaker. I have a leadership company where we speak and deliver training with companies around the world, but it's all about the level that you operate at. So the reason why, as I just give a little bit of context to our business, the Leadership Club, we work with experts across 5 different backgrounds, and they are sport, business, military, academic, and world explorers. Now, the only reason I work with these people is because I have one way of understanding high performance and leadership: background in sport, studying the psychology. But it's all about the level you attained. If I got to play in the Premier League, great, you get into a small percentage of people. But look at, as soon as you go into that level, what about winning the Premier League? What about winning the Champions League? What about winning the World Cup? It's all levels of it. So the expertise is more not necessarily how far I am up the ladder compared to you. It's more like, what is my experience? And it's only because I'm a lot older than you, I'm nearly 50, that I have this experience of doing this for a little bit longer. But if you go back to the question, what is leadership? I would say we're all leading. Every single person you ever played with or played under, that's leadership. Your teammate is showing an example of leadership, as well as every single coach and manager that I played under, every business owner, every single global CEO that I work with. They're all leading and they all have styles of leadership. Probably the question might be better is, what impact does that leadership have? So, for example, I could put the large majority of managers and coaches that I played under in my nearly 20-year playing career and say there wasn't a lot of great leaders. There really weren't a lot of great leaders. If I think about what did I learn from all those managers and head coaches, probably not a lot. I probably learned more of how not to do it. You know why? Because they were so immature, like so petulant. You have kids, Seb, don't you? I've got two kids now. I'm like, the way my 4-year-old operates sometimes is how I used to see a grown man, a Premier League manager, a championship manager. That's the way he used to behave, like my 4-year-old. This is crazy when you think about this 20 years of playing and going, I've seen grown men not able to control their emotions the way a 4-year-old child can. So we talk about leadership. I'm not don't think I learned a lot of how I should be leading and more what I shouldn't be doing. But if I go all the way back to Chris, I'll put Chris in one example of unbelievably successful. His playing career, his coaching career, his managerial career, his international managerial career, all of that. He was in the back to levels. He's into the tiniest percentage people who have won promotion into the Premier League. How many people have done that? He's managed I don't know how many hundred games in the Premier. So that one way of doing it. Unbelievably successful, but doing it through an empathetic lens. And then I would probably put someone like a Paul Lambert in a different category where he had a better playing career than Chris Hughton. Well, maybe you could put the both. Chris won European trophies at Spurs, but Paul Lambert won the Champions League with Dortmund, man Mark Zidane in the final. So like an unbelievable career. But when I saw how he operated from his managerial style, it was just all about results. It was all about winning. And actually, he didn't really want to communicate with his players. He was just pretty much very standoff. I'm not really going to build rapport. But as soon as I walk in, the smallest thing I say has a huge impact because it's all about let's just win.
And that's
So he wasn't giving us the path to winning. He wasn't telling us how to win. He was just giving us the North Star. This is the direction. Win, go, make it happen. And then he trusted us as players to make it happen.
now that you have a master degree in psychology, that was back in the day when you were playing. When you look back, now that yeah, you've been advanced in psychology. Is that one of the moment to talk about Paul Lambert that now you understand because of your knowledge of psychology? Because when you mentioned that to me, for me, I see somebody which is very goal oriented, not really a people person, but really is a go getter. There you go. That's his style of his preference of behaviors.
Yeah,
It
preference. Great,
prefer,
great word. Great word.
preference.
Yeah,
That's the way. It doesn't mean that he can't communicate with people, but he prefers to be like that. Now that
yeah.
you are advanced in psychology, is that my question is what are the moments that now you do understand that you were an understanding back in the days?
Yeah, and I think that's what it is. And I think that's why I say that word, that preference, is so key. Because actually, interestingly, just talk about Paul Lambert. At the end, I only had one season with him, but at the end of that season, I thought he couldn't communicate because he didn't communicate with the players for pretty much 99% of the season. We won the league, went on like a 30-game unbeaten run, won the league, beat Leeds to the championship. And then I saw Paul Lambert stand up in front of 500 people at an end of season dinner, and he was almost like the best communicator I've ever seen. He stood up and he was just telling stories. He was getting everybody laughing. He had everybody in the palm of his hands, like you and I as a speaker, what you want to do in front of an audience. And then he did that for like 90 minutes. And I'm going, oh, so he can do it. He just chose not to. So it was his preference. But of course, it's then back to probably how this conversation will probably have lots of recall jokes and loops in the conversation. It goes all the way back to the fact that this is exactly how he wanted to be. This was his preference of success leaves clues. So who did Paul Lambert play under at Celtic? Martin O'Neill. One of the best managers who's been around for a long time. So clever, so brilliant at getting the best out of his team. And yet, of course, who did Martin O'Neill play under? And Martin O'Neill won, of course, European Cup at Nottingham Forest. He played in World Cups with Northern Ireland. Who was his manager at Nottingham Forest? One of the greatest managers of all time, Brian Clough. So when I go back to Gianfranco Zola learning from Diego Maradona, success leaves clues. When we talk about Paul Lambert, well, actually, he was very similar because of the conversations I'd had with the players who'd played under Martin O'Neill at Celtic and Norwich City and Aston Villa, who was very similar to exactly how Brian Clough operated. So success leaves clues.
Listen, I'm a big fan because for me, it's amazing. Your book. Okay, now let me put it this way: football teaches us a lot about ego. Football wire us into the ego, but your book teaches people the total opposite.
Yeah, yeah, very good.
It is because it's not about you.
Yeah.
It
So can I just say the title and how that came up, because it's not about you. The psychology of leadership came as a result of all of the interviews from the book. Can I share a little bit on that?
Listen, it's your book. I'm
Yeah.
all is. Of course you can share. I don't want to
Because
spoil it because I want people
yeah,
to buy it. Yeah,
yeah,
go and buy.
yeah,
But yeah, that's my yeah. I want to, yeah. It was me a little bit, luring you to share. It's not about your psychology or leadership, but I
yeah,
love the title because I always say it's not about you.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
as much as we try, it's
We like it to be about us.
yeah.
We like
We
it to
would
be
love
about
it.
us.
We would love.
We love the pats on the back though.
Oh yeah, but it's not about you. The stage
Yeah.
is yours, sir.
So essentially what I'd realized. So I wrote my first book a year after I stopped playing, 2011, and I went to Bloomsbury, and it was my first conversation with the publishing house, and I shared what I was doing, and they offered me a book deal within one meeting, and I was like, oh, this was easy. I write a book, I bring it to a publisher, they offer me a deal. That was it. 3 steps done. But of course, that's not how most people have an experience of trying to publish a book. So for this book, I thought, well, interesting. The three topics that I love delivering on and talking about, because of the football and background, are around leadership, are around performance, and of course around teamwork. And it's all everything that's involved in football over 20 years. But because I did my master's in psychology, all of my keynotes are the psychology of leadership, the psychology of performance, and the psychology of teamwork. So those three subjects I love. So when I was writing this book, I was interviewing 15 of the most amazing people that who are with us, and they are what we call our roster of world-class performers and experts. So again, from sport, business, military, academia, and world exploring. And out of all these interviews for people like Emmanuel Petit, the Arsenal and French World Cup winner, or Carl Frampton, the two-weight world champion boxer, all the way through to Alex Cruz, the former CEO of British Airways, all the way through to someone like Sean Conway, who completed 105 Ironman competitions in 105 days, which just blows my mind. But again, because these people have done amazing things, and one of the ladies I interviewed was a girl called Emily Jansen in America. Now, Emily was the first female GM of a Major League Baseball team. Now, of course, just doing that alone is an incredible achievement. And as I interviewed her, and the first question was, so Emily, tell me about what's leadership to you? And she went, well, Paul, it's not about you, is it? And I thought, wow, she's just hit the nail on the head. So for me, whenever she said that, I was like, do you mind if I steal that line and use it as the title of my book? Because she was my last interview of the 15, and every single one of the other 15, 14 people had said, well, leadership's all about the people. It's all about getting them, inspired and motivated and excited and working towards a goal and all of the understanding your people. So when she said, it's not about you, I thought, wow, because I've actually going to write this book, Seb, as one of three books a series of three over the next 3 years. So this one's the psychology of leadership, then the psychology of performance, and then the psychology of teamwork. But I thought those titles were a little bit dry. They're not catchy. So we're now calling this one, It's Not About You, the The Psychology of Leadership. Then next year, when the book comes out, then it's going to be what you said earlier. It's all about you, the psychology of performance, because we have to have an ego to get to that level. But of course, once you get in a team, it's all about team, the psychology of teamwork. So that's the next three books that'll be coming out over the next 3 years.
Yeah, I like that. I'm a big fan. What patterns kept showing up when you're studying those leaders across those industries? Because surely there's patterns. We don't. You haven't picked those five industries for no reason. Why are those patterns, and can we find them in the book?
Yeah, so one of the biggest ones that came out time and time again was empathy. And it's really funny, isn't it? Because, if we're talking about what did traditional leadership look like, then probably empathy wasn't the subject or the characteristic of the best leaders. But the more I spoke to these people, the more I interviewed them, the more research I did, that understanding and that and it's there's just such a massive difference between sympathy, like don't feel sorry for someone, but understand them. And that's probably the greatest lesson that came out of the entire book. How can I, as a leader, because they're not necessarily, I'm not necessarily in charge of 10,000 people or 100,000 people, whatever the business is, but they're in my charge. So, how do I make the best to give them the platform to be successful?
When you stop playing football, obviously there was a gap. There was, we call it delayed death. There's always something. Did psychology help you to fill that gap? To fill that gap. How did it,
Completely.
and how?
And I didn't actually, interesting you call it a gap. We all have uh, a period between finishing our playing career and starting the next step of our journey. But for me, it was a 1 week holiday because I then went into what I was going to do after I stopped playing a week later. So, what I realized, and this goes all the way back, another loop back to the start, when I was 21, I had the title of my first book in my head. So I knew the first book that I'd ever gonna write, even though I had no idea how to write a book or the whole process. But I knew it was going to be called "The Stupid Footballer Is Dead" because I had this overwhelming impression, and you fit into this category perfectly, Seb, that people have a perception of what footballers are like. But when you actually meet these guys, like the last thing footballers are stupid. Even people who aren't academically the brightest, like how switched on, how smart, how astute are footballers. And it's because it's part of the nature, it's back to the 10,000 hour rule. When you have thousands of people coming up to you every year, probably for you a lot more than me. But when so many people keep coming to you very quickly, you become very astute of what does this person want? Are they trying to get something out of me? Do I have to protect myself? Can I be trustful? All of these things we get probably 20 times a day versus people, normal people who aren't in football, normal people, probably get maybe once a year or twice a year. We get it 20 times a day. So the whole Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours theory of actually we're learning this. So footballers are some of the brightest, most astute people I've ever come across. But that title of the book came because even from a 17-year-old, when I read my first book on the subject by Tony Robbins, um, the entire process around what is my identity, how do my beliefs shape my identity, was already formulating in my head. So I knew as a 21-year-old kid, I can't just be a professional footballer. Because let's be honest, if this is your entire identity, this one thing that lots of players just have as their identity, they live and breathe it, and there's nothing else. And without going too deep, but one of the things that I learned and studied over the years, being a professional footballer is actually an extrinsic event. It's external to you. And you had an amazing career set, but if it was intrinsic, if I could control it, I'd go and sign for Real Madrid. But I can't. I have to put myself in a position for Real Madrid to then sign me, or for Tottenham Hotspur to sign me, or for Burnley, or for Norwich City, or everyone else that I play with. But that's extrinsic. And if it's extrinsic, someone else controls it. And if someone else controls it, when that day comes that it's out of your control and your entire identity is built around that, my entire identity is lost. So from a really early age, not only was I a professional footballer, I was also a student because I was studying my business course, my sports science degree. I was also learning Italian. I was learning to play the piano. I was learning to play the guitar. I was a boyfriend. I was a brother. I was a son. I was a landlord. I was all of these things. So look at this now, Seb. In 2010, when I stopped, because personally, I had let's say, the wherewithal to decide to stop playing, I could have carried on. But I thought, if I decide to stop, that's going to be way more empowering than someone telling me that I'm not good enough to play anymore. And when I decide to stop and that football is not part of my identity, look at all the stuff that's still there, which is why I very quickly and probably quite seamlessly transitioned into being a keynote speaker, working as a psychologist with lots of Premier League teams. Now I got to the point where I'm now a business owner, and now we're building a global tech platform because I basically want to be the Irish Mark Zuckerberg now.
And trust me, the law of attraction, you will. I'm not, you will when you put your mind into it, and you get the psychology around it and the awareness. For me, is most of the time is your inability to self-assess who gets us in trouble. And I think
Yeah.
because you do self-assess and you get sense of awareness pretty high, so you're able to move, to adapt, and to maneuver around things, and you're in control. You're in control of what you're doing. You don't. So you will be the Irish mark, but
Irish Mark Zuckerberg.
yeah, you.
Seb, one of the things I've got to say, and this was really, I think this was pivotal for me, really one of the most important moments of my life. Because as a 16-year-old kid, I didn't realize, but because, whether because I'm 5'6", because I was the smallest player in the team, maybe because I had an Irish accent in London at the time. I don't know why, but I had, maybe because I trained with Jurgen Klinsmann, and Jurgen was at the Spurs team my first year of playing, and I was constantly comparing myself to Jurgen and going, he's a World Cup winner. How can I ever get to that level? Or maybe our manager was a World Cup winner, and I was thinking, wow, I'm just out of my depth. Or maybe because I saw Teddy Sheringham and Sol Campbell every day. I don't know what the reason was, but I had an inferiority complex when I first joined Spurs of essentially saying, I don't think I will ever be able to do what my goal and my dream was. The reason why I left my family and friends was to become a professional footballer. And yet, everything in my head, I was telling myself that I will never be a professional footballer. Now, that is so contradictory, isn't it? You think, well, if you set yourself a goal, then you're going to try and help yourself to do it, and external things outside might stop you. But actually, what I've experienced and what I realized, actually, what I did my TED talk on a couple of months ago, is the fact that my goal was here, but the belief that I had for what I thought I was capable of was actually only here. So you can see the disconnect. So, what actually happened, part of the story, 30 years ago, I read this book that I mentioned, Tony Robbins, and it talked about how essentially, you will only ever be as successful of what your beliefs allow you to be. So as part of this transition, again, just keep looping it back, as part of this transition out of professional football, after I'd read that book and I was walking into the physio room, because that's the hub of a football club and of the training ground. Everybody wants to go into the physio room just to mess about and have a bit of crack. And I'm sitting in there listening to the best players in the country and the world, possibly, saying things to me like Teddy Sheringham or Sol Campbell or Darren Anderton or whoever was speaking to me. And they were going, wee man, play as long as you can. The football days, they're the best days of your life. You'll miss it when you're gone. You're a long time retired. So outwardly, because I was a shy kid, smallest guy on the team, outwardly, I'd be going, yeah, 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 yeah. Inwardly, because I'd read the book by Tony Robbins and it basically asked you to question your beliefs, inwardly I'd be going, what a load of rubbish. What a terrible belief to have. Play as long as you can. You'll miss it when you're gone. The best days of your life, long time retired. So what that means is there's an inference, or there is an implied meaning, if the playing days are the best days of my life, and if you're very, very lucky, and I hadn't played professionally by that point, if you're very lucky, you'll get 1 year professional. If you're very lucky, you get one game in the Premier League. If you're very lucky, you'll make it to 25, 30. I managed to get to 32 before the official retirement's 35. But of course, what the implied meaning is, you get to 35, the rest of your life is shit. Why would the best players in the world say that to me? because that is the most destructive, damaging belief a young player or any player in football could ever have.
Oh, I totally.
Interesting. What's happened, Seb, is when I stopped playing, when I decided to stop playing, A, it was the best decision of my life. And B, my life has only improved significantly in the quality of my life and the opportunities and the experiences and the trajectory that is going on since I came out of professional football, as much as I loved playing
Oh,
professional football.
Paul, I'll tell you a quick story about that. On that note, one day I was in Cameroon, back home in Cameroon with my family. My dad was there, my aunties, and I had just stopped. I had stopped playing football, and they were panicking. Honestly, they were panicking because, bear in mind, that's all they know. They're not really aware of things. They're not where I am, I would say, mentally, psychologically.
Mhm.
And we were sat down outside, very in a Cameroonian environment in the neighborhood. And they were really panicking. And at some point, I had to stop them. I said, listen, lads, listen, all of you. Honestly, I'm so happy.
Good.
I'm
Good.
very, I'm very good. They were like, what? But how are you gonna do? And what your life's gonna be now? But I said, listen, honestly, and I truly mean it. This only gonna get better. I'm gonna have an even better life after football than I had it in football. They were looking at me like if I was a weirdo, and I said, I truly believe it. And my dad looked at me. He said, "You seem to really believe what you're saying." I said to my dad, "Dad, I swear to God, I believe 110% of every word I just told you is only gonna get better because I'm just starting life. I mean, so yes,
You're a young man. You're a young man
you're a
when you
young
finish
man.
playing.
You got the life ahead of you, and that's one of the biggest. I think that's a gift. That's really a
Yeah.
gift to when you nail that. That changed the whole trajectory of how you see your life, your value, and what your life is going to be.
So interesting you say that. And again, you give really nice compliment to me earlier about the kind of expert and the level that you operate at. And that's why I would say your self awareness and your understanding on top of everything you've done already is so high because what I'm saying to you now, like I'm nearly 50, Seb. When I left football, I did not know it was going to be the best decision in my life. I did not know that my life would get exponentially better. I just hoped that it would be good. I just basically didn't want my life to go downhill after football. And that's why I always said yes to everything. I tried so many things. I went and just put my whole heart and soul and work ethic into it because I had this belief, and it was only a belief, that I thought, well, I wasn't born as a professional player. And once you understand the process, once you understand the level to get the mastery of anything, whether it's playing the piano or playing in the Premier League, it just takes time, effort, consistently improving the feedback loop, applying that understanding to keep getting better. So I thought, well, I've never spoken in public. No one has ever paid me a penny to be a speaker in public. And yet my goal was I wanted to earn 10,000, 20,000 pound an hour to speak for a company and be flown around the world. But the likelihood of that happening was so small. But in my head, I was like, it's just a skill. It's just a skill that I can learn. So if I can just keep applying the same work ethic that I put into football to this new role, it's only a matter of time before I'm doing what I want to do. So interestingly, the thing that you said, because you just gone out of your playing career back home and sitting there with your family, that is really perceptive because it's only now me sitting here as nearly a 50-year-old guy, a bit like what Steve Jobs said in his graduation speech for Stanford University, where he talks about, as he goes through his life, all of the amazing things that he did and happened. He never knew that it was going to happen because you can't join the dots going forward. So you can't come out of football like I did and go, this is going to be the best decision ever. I'm going to be a speaker. I'm going to start a leadership club. I'm going to build a global tech. You can't do it going forward. You can only do it join the dots going back. And that's where I'm now because I've had 15 years growing up in Belfast, then I had pretty much the next 15 years as a professional athlete, then I've had the next 15 years being a keynote speaker, and now I'm in the last quarter of my career. I'm going for my kind of third act of going, I now want to be a global tech entrepreneur. But Whether it happens or not is out of my control. But all I would say is I stopped drinking 18 months ago. I actually just gave up sugar 2 months ago because everything that I do in my life, I just want to focus on what can I control and what can I get out of the way to make it the likelihood of being successful as high as possible.
Listen, it's because we know each other pretty well. You trim down. You trim.
You didn't say that at the start. You used to be a big fatty, Paul. Now you've. You want to see the six pack? I've got.
Yeah. but that's honestly that's intentionality, as you said. It's
Yeah, yeah,
intentionality. So
yeah,
no, kudos to that. Okay, just to wrap us up a little bit, I need to
yeah.
know. I need to know. I really need to know. What does success look like now for Paul McVeigh?
Well, it's probably always been the same in the last 30 years. So I'm in the 32nd year of my career, and I probably didn't realize it then, but it's always been one word, and that's progress. There's probably not a point where I'll go, once I get to this point in my life, I will feel successful. Because even now, at this stage, I don't feel successful. And that's not an inferiority thing. That's not a humble thing. That is I am striving with all of my might, with all of my ability to mobilize a community around the world. Because I want to bring the Googles, the Microsofts, the KPMGs, the Rolls Royce, the HSBC, all of these biggest companies in the world on our platform with the best speakers in the world, whether it's, a Moga Dot who ran Google X for 10 years, whether it's, I don't know, you know, Brene Brown, whether it's Barack Obama, all the people who get paid hundreds and millions of pounds and dollars and euros all over the world to get paid for speaking. I want them to all come on our platform. And that takes a huge amount of effort to be able to go, how do you get all the corporates? How do you get all these amazing speakers? How do we take what can be a 4 month process into 4 minutes on our platform, almost like the Airbnb of keynote speaking? But actually, even and not an if or when, but even if that becomes hugely successful, I don't think I'll ever go, all right, I've now built a global tech platform like Airbnb. Do I want to stop? Probably not. Because then it'll be, how can I keep progressing in my life? Because I've just got such an insatiable desire and curiosity for learning and improving and doing something different. And I suppose the word now that we're using every single day in the tech build is iterating. How do you keep improving just a little bit better, just a little bit more? So I apply it not just to my football, not just to my speaking, but to every single thing I do in my life.
Thank you very much, Paul. You know what? Football gave us a platform, but
Absolutely.
football gave us a platform. But leadership, psychology, and purpose gave us a direction. So I can only wish you the best. And to be fair, I love the idea of you being the Irish Mark Zuckerberg. Please, I love that one. And as my tagline is, you got to take what is yours, and I really believe that is yours. So my friend, take what is yours. Thank you for joining us in the Players Lounge on Football Business TV, where the game gets down to business. And until next time, take care of yourself. And I'll see you soon, my friend, my Irish Mark Zuckerberg.